Straight Shift with the Car Chick, the podcast that's all about cars, buying, selling, fixing, and driving, and sometimes pretty fast if you're the car chick. Now, here she is.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Straight Shift. Today, this is part 2 of how to find a good mechanic. The previous episode was part 1, where I talked about what is broken, for lack of a better word, in the automotive service industry that creates so much distrust between consumers and mechanic shops, and how those problems end up costing you, as said consumer, money, and it makes it really hard to find a good mechanic. A lot of my women friends and clients often joke that it's harder to find a mechanic than it is a hairdresser that you can trust. So today we're going to go through a little more of the nitty gritties about mechanics and shops and what should you look for? How do you find a good place to get your car worked on? And I want to start by talking about the mechanics themselves as individuals. Not all mechanics are equal. This is true, obviously, of any person in any job. There are some good mechanics and there are some bad mechanics. There are some really lazy mechanics. There are some very diligent mechanics. There are very honest mechanics. And then there's a whole bunch of jerks that want to cut corners and screw you over. And this is true in just about every industry. You could say the same thing about lawyers or doctors or just about any profession. But with mechanics, I want to talk about, where some of these variabilities come from and what you need to look for and look out for when you're looking for one of these men or women to work on your car. And unfortunately, there aren't that many female mechanics out there, but there are more and more women getting into the industry, sometimes in self-defense because they personally have been so darn frustrated with trying to find a mechanic they can trust that they said, screw it, I'm just going to become one. So if you find a female mechanic out there, great. That's fantastic. Certainly let me know where you found her and give me your contact information so I can reach out to her. But here's what varies with mechanics. Mechanics vary in their training, which leads to differences in their skills. Their experience level varies, and quite frankly, their attitudes vary. So some mechanics are really, really good at what they do, and some guys, I swear, I would not let them touch my lawnmower. So in terms of training, mechanics can be trained in several different ways. Some of these guys don't have any formal training at all. They simply have taught themselves. Maybe they grew up working on cars, with their dad or their brother or another relative or friend, or just figured it out on their own. My husband started out that way simply by tinkering, but he's also the type of person who was taking apart toasters and radios when he was 3 years old. So yeah, he was one of those guys. So mechanical stuff just comes naturally to him. And there are a lot of people out there that are like that. And some of those guys are really, really good. They've been basically backyard mechanics their whole life, and they have a ton of experience, but not a lot of formal training. And they may very well be really good, but you're not likely to find those guys, and guys or girls, but guys mostly, unless you know them personally or you get referred to them by someone who knows them personally. These people also tend to do more word of mouth advertising versus having a more formal business model. So those can be kind of iffy. You just never know what you're going to get. Other mechanics, if they do have formal training, they have typically either gotten it through a dealership or manufacturer's training and certification program that is very brand specific. So my ex-brother-in-law was a Chrysler mechanic, and he went to the Chrysler school outside of Charlotte here where I am based, and he was specifically trained to work on Chrysler vehicles. Now, he had been working on cars since he was a teenager, so he had more personal knowledge of how to work on other makes and models. And there are some similarities. Cars are essentially put together the same way, just different manufacturers do things differently, and some are a bigger pain in the butt than others. Like just about anybody can learn to work on a Toyota because they're put together so logically and relatively simply in comparison. And then there's German cars and heaven forbid Italian cars where you look at them like, what the heck were they thinking? So this is where if you want to find a mechanic who is specific to your brand, you want to look for one that has been trained and certified specifically by that manufacturer. And when you get into especially your very exotic brands or your more niche brands, like if you have a McLaren, first of all, I hate you because you have McLaren and I don't. But let's say you have a McLaren. You don't want just any mechanic working on that car. You need someone who has been trained by McLaren to work on that car. So mechanics can be trained by the manufacturer, and then they usually get additional on-the-job training at the dealership, depending on what that dealership's processes are and how they train and nurture their own mechanics, if they do so at all. Another type of training that a mechanic may have is an overall automotive degree. It's usually a 2-year degree at a college. It might be a community college or a trade college, or it might be a 4-year college. We have a big one here in the Charlotte area that is basically paid for and sponsored by the Hendrick organization because they figured out it's so hard to find mechanics that they're just going to basically buy the school at Central Piedmont Community College and UNC Charlotte, and they pay for the program, meaning they get first dibs on all the mechanics that come out of that program. So that's their way of growing their own mechanics through our local college. And it's a great program. This is the one my husband went through. And the people that go through that program, because it's not brand or manufacturer specific, they learn here is how cars work. Here's how they're put together. Here's all the different systems and how they work. It's more of a general education. And very frequently, mechanics with this type of training have a better understanding truly of how cars work. One of the weaknesses of some of the brand or manufacturer specific programs is they don't always teach you how a car works and why. They teach you more, here's how to swap parts, without necessarily having a bigger picture understanding of how the car works. This is why some mechanics are really good at diagnosing problems with your vehicle and others are not. And I know I've talked about that before on podcasts. And one of the things that drives me crazy is when you take your car in because something weird is going on and you're not sure what it is, and the shop can't diagnose it because they don't have a technician that can do diagnostics, that truly understands how are these systems supposed to work, how is a car put together, and then have the skills to go through a process to isolate what that problem is, where it is, so you can solve it. Instead, they're like, well, let's just try replacing this part and hope for the best. So most of your mechanics that have really good diagnostic skills will have this more general, comprehensive educational background versus being trained to swap parts on a particular brand. And finally, there is another level above and beyond their training, which is ASE certified. And I am a huge proponent of ASE certified, and I only believe in using ASE certified technicians to work on your car. So what the heck is ASE? ASE is short for the National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence. They have been around since the early 70s, and they're an independent nonprofit organization. And their goal is to continue to improve the quality of vehicle repair and service in the industry. And they do this by testing and certifying automotive professionals. How do they do this? They have almost 300,000 ASE certified technicians that have been through this testing and certification procedure, and it's professionals across the board. It's not just mechanics. It's also body work people and people who work on different types of vehicles. There's literally 40 different tests just for technicians, just for mechanics. And it covers every different system in normal vehicles up through specialty vehicles like diesels, heavy duty trucks. There are tests specifically for school buses and city type buses, and even specific tests and certifications for military vehicles. Yes, a mechanic can get certified that they can work on a tank. That sounds kind of awesome to me. But also for collision and repairs, and even in the service writing side, that's the person that you as a customer interact with and talk to. Those people can be certified in what they do because they have to have a good combination of knowledge from understanding enough of the mechanics to be able to communicate effectively with the actual technician and to be able to properly build the quote for you. But they've also got to have good people skills and good sales skills to communicate with you and to sell the work. So they have a series of tests just for them. There's a ton of stuff. And there's another level above that that's called Master Certified. And these are more detailed, more advanced tests that really make sure that the professional knows their shit. Pardon my French, but these tests are hard and it takes a lot of training and studying and experience on the job to get to the level where you can pass these tests. I'm going to brag. My husband is a master certified technician. He has all the certifications within working on normal vehicles. Even though he's not working in the industry anymore, before he ended up leaving the industry, he did get all of his master's certifications. So I was very proud of him. And I looked at a lot of the practice tests. And let me tell you, this stuff is not easy. It's not just a multiple choice you can kind of guess your way through. They give the technician scenarios using an imaginary car and talk through if a customer had a complaint, here's kind of what's going on with this imaginary car. What would you do? How would you diagnose it? What would be the first thing you would look at? So it really tests that they can think through and solve problems, not just pick the right answer off the test. So the tests are very, very difficult. They can be very, very stressful. And if a mechanic has passed these tests, they probably know their stuff. It's important to note that ASE as an organization certifies the individual automotive professionals, not the shops. So a lot of shops will say, hey, we're ASE certified, or hey, we have ASE certified technicians. And that's great. But it also may mean that they have one tech out of a dozen that is ASE certified. So you really need to clarify when you're talking with the shop and looking for a mechanic to service your vehicle to make sure that the mechanic that's actually putting his or her hands on your car is the one that has ASE certifications. And which certifications do they have? Because as I said, there's 40 different tests. Which certifications, which systems are they certified on? A technician can say, hey, I'm ASE certified if they have one certification. Or do they have 9 certifications, meaning they understand how your whole car works, not just how the fluids work or how the brake systems work? So don't be afraid to ask these detailed questions and ask to see proof of their certification in those different areas, because believe me, ASE absolutely provides us with all of the paperwork. So in talking about the shops, there are different shops where you can get your car certified. And so finding a good mechanic to work on your car is a combination of finding a good shop and then finding a good technician within that shop. So let's talk for a minute about the different types of repair facilities where you could take your car, because that may very well be where you start in your search for a technician, unless you get referred specifically to an individual mechanic. Different places where you can get your car worked on. Number one, obviously, is dealerships. They are going to be certified to work on your specific brand of car, and there are benefits to that. And within the dealership, they usually have different levels of technicians. So if you only need an oil change, it's not a huge deal. They'll put their oil change person on it that may not have any certifications. Maybe as an apprentice, they're still learning, but they've at least hopefully been trained by that dealership on their processes, versus all the way up to master level technicians who either have an ASE master certification or they have a master level certification from that manufacturer. Like, for example, my friend Bogey from All Girls Garage, she's a BMW specific master certified technician. So she's a Beamer girl. My husband is ASE certified, master certified, meaning he's certified to work on pretty much any type of car. I would know he would love to have worked on a McLaren, but didn't come up. But your dealerships are a place to start. You'll pay more usually there. Their labor rates tend to be a little bit higher, but you also get some benefits, like they'll usually have loaner vehicles. Or they might have pickup and drop off service just to make the process a little more convenient for you. And they also have access usually right away or very quickly to any parts that you may need. So you can get your car work done usually faster there. Not always. Everything comes with a grain of salt. But another thing is, if your car is still under warranty and the problem that you're having ends up being a warranty issue, you're already at the dealership and they should know it's a warranty issue and should tell you. And then you can just handle that work under the warranty right there, all under one roof, versus having to have an independent shop identify it's a problem and then think to say, oh, wait, your car's under warranty, this should be covered. Or have the honesty to say, hey, this is what we found, but this is a warranty issue. You should get the car to the dealership because they'll fix it under warranty. You don't want to pay us to do that. There's a lot of shops that are honest that'll do that, but they also have to think about it and realize your car is still under warranty or not. So another place you can get your car worked on are franchised independent shops. These are your Goodyears, your Firestones, your Triple A's. They're usually associated with another trusted brand within the industry, which may or may not mean squat, quite frankly, but it's just good branding. It's good marketing. But it also means they may have some more standard processes across their stores that they operate on that would give you a more consistent and possibly a better experience versus an independent shop that their processes are at the mercy of the owner and what they decide to do and how they decide to run their business. So again, that's your truly independent shops. Some of them work on all makes and models. Many of them are specialty shops. So most major cities have at least one shop that is Hondas only or Hondas and Acuras, BMWs only, or European, German cars only. And those specialty shops can be good for you if you are loyal to a specific brand or if it's a little more difficult to work on your car. Like you've heard me talk about German cars since I have owned them for years. They're a pain in the butt to work on. And you have to have special tools and special computers. And not every mechanic can handle the complexity and the over-engineering of German cars in their experience. So that's where the specialty shops can really be of benefit. And finally, there are the quickie lube places. They may just do oil changes and simple fast jobs, or they may actually do everything and you can get it all done under one roof. The problem is their business model tends to be about doing things fast, not necessarily right. Like many of them will not even put the right oil in your car because they keep a giant vat of bulk oil that is a common oil for a lot of cars, but it may not be the right one for your car. So, but they may put it in your car anyway because it's quicker and cheaper for them to do so, but it's not the right type of oil for your car. So you have to be careful with these places and really look at what their business model is and ask the questions. Are you putting the right oil in my car? A lot of times they hire technicians that have no qualifications whatsoever, just guy off street. If he knows where the drain plug is or can find it, they'll hire him. So I don't have a good feel about a lot of these quickie places. I don't have a lot of good experience with them, and I don't know a lot of people that have, but that's not to say there might not be one out there near you that is really good at what they do, but definitely look at them very, 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 very carefully. Remember, you get what you pay for. And in that same vein, there are places like Walmart and Sam's Club and Costco and stores like that that have an automotive service department. Again, I'm going to go back to what I said about getting what you pay for. I personally would never use one of these for the same reason that I would personally never use one of the quickie lube places. But if it's convenient for you, it's not to say that there's not a good technician there. I know they don't pay their techs very well because I have looked at that specifically. So they are also getting what they pay for. So do your homework and choose a place that has technicians that have a level of qualifications and experience that you are comfortable with. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the very, very specifics of exactly what you should look for and what you should consider when you're trying to select one of these places and find the right person to work on your car. Be right back after this. Do you hate car shopping? Do you worry about being taken advantage of or about finding the right car at a great price? Buying a car can be a frustrating and time-consuming experience. But what if you could get a great deal without having to do a ton of research, without having to haggle, and without the fear of buying a lemon? You can. As your personal car shopper, the Car Chick will help you pick the perfect car based on your unique lifestyle, budget, and personality. She'll handle all of the legwork and negotiating for you. All you have to do is sign the papers and take the keys. It's that easy. To learn how the Car Chick can save you time, money, and hassle on your next car purchase, give us a call at 704-248-8706. That's 704-248-8706. Or visit us on the web at thecarchick.com.
The Car Chick is back for more Straight Shift.
Welcome back to the Straight Shift. Today we are talking about how to find a good mechanic, and this is part 2 of a 2-part series. So if you missed part 1, you might want to go back and listen to that. You don't have to in order to get everything out of this one. Part 1 was more of me explaining why I think the industry is broken and why finding a mechanic is so dang hard in the first place. And this is more focused on what are the questions you need to ask? What do you need to look for? When you are looking for someone to service your beloved vehicle, do it well, do it honestly. Who do you want to give your business to? Because there are a bazillion choices out there for automotive service. And half of the battle in finding a good mechanic within a shop is the high turnover. Even if you do find a good mechanic at a specific shop, is that person going to stay there? Or, next month, are they going to have left and be somewhere else? Mechanic shops have a turnover rate very similar to fast food joints. It's really, really bad. And why that is, I addressed a lot in part 1. It's about how the shops themselves compensate and treat their mechanics, and they are not always great. So this is why I recommend when you do find a specific technician that you really like and really trust to work on your car, get their cell phone number and tell them, if you ever end up at a different shop, please call me so that I can follow you. And that happened to my husband. He ended up going to some different shops, and he had a customer base that followed him everywhere he went. Fortunately, they were people that knew me, and so they would call me, I called such and such a shop and David's not there anymore. Where is he now? So, there was an advantage to him being able to bring his own customer base to any shop that he went to, but that's something that you may have to do. Same thing with hairdressers. I had been following the same hairdresser to like 5 different shops because I trusted her. I didn't care about the shop. I cared about how she cut my hair. Same thing with a mechanic. You care about how that particular person takes care of your vehicle and takes care of you. But when you're looking just to start out of where do I even look to find a mechanic, the first thing you have to consider is what kind of car do you have? Because as I have said many times, not every shop can work on every type of car. They may not have trained technicians. They may not have the equipment, the tools, and the computers to talk to every different type of car. German cars, a little more difficult. The computer software needed to communicate with a German car is astronomically more expensive than the software needed to communicate with an Asian car. Why? Because the German manufacturers don't want independent shops working on their cars. They want to force you to the dealers. And so they charge an obscene amount of money for that software. And not every independent shop can afford to pay that if they don't specialize in German cars. Do you have a hybrid car? Hybrid cars have some special quirks to them for their servicing that not every shop may be able to handle. Not every technician has been trained to work on hybrid cars. Hybrid cars, because the cooling system for the air conditioning and the coolant that works in the car, it's a different type of fluid. So when it's time to have that fluid flushed in a hybrid car, you can't just take it to a normal shop to have that fluid flushed. You have to take it to a shop that has the dedicated machine and dedicated fluid just for flushing that on a hybrid car. Again, not every shop is going to invest in that expensive equipment unless they can do enough business that the return on that investment makes sense for them. So if you have a hybrid vehicle, look to see, is there a hybrid specialty shop in your area? Or it may make sense to take it to the dealership. Similar with if you have a diesel, a lot of trucks, a lot of SUVs, we're seeing more and more clean diesel technology. And so especially in your European cars where diesel is so much more common in Europe, you can get the diesel models here in the US. Remember that whole diesel scandal thing with a certain company that started with a V and ended with a W? Yeah, those guys. But diesel engines do work differently. And so the mechanic has to be trained on how to work on a diesel, and they may have to have some special tools and special equipment. So if you have a diesel, make sure you have a diesel trained mechanic in a shop that can handle it. Don't even get me started on all electric cars like Teslas and the Nissan Leaf. And there's a whole bunch of electric cars that are hitting the market more and more. And that's one of the biggest threats to independent shops, because electric cars are a completely different ball game. It's different equipment, it's different training, it's a whole different service methodology. So if you have an electric car, take it to the dealership, at least until enough of them get into the marketplace that it creates a secondary market for independent service shops that can handle electric cars. And you may find that in a place like California. You're not as likely to find that in like Birmingham, Alabama, or in Texas, or places where electric cars are not as popular as they are in places like California. So the next thing you want to consider is whether or not your car is still under the original factory warranty. Let me be clear, you do not have to do your service at the dealership to maintain your warranty. And if the dealership tells you you do, they are not only lying to you, but they are breaking the law in doing so. They are not allowed to tell you that because it is not true. However, it can be easier and more convenient, because if you do have a problem, as I said before, and that problem is covered by the factory warranty, you're already there and they can just do it and give you the good news. Hey, we found the problem. And guess what? It's covered by your warranty. You don't actually owe us any money. It'll be done tomorrow. Woohoo! It also makes it harder for the manufacturer to deny warranty work and claim that, oh, well, this was caused by a mechanic that wasn't qualified to work on your car. They actually did something wrong and therefore we're going to void your warranty. That's a fairly rare circumstance, but I have personally seen it once. There was a lovely couple that had a Hyundai, and they had come into an independent shop that I knew while I was there, and their timing belt had broken and caused huge damage. Basically, you had to replace the whole engine. It blew up the whole engine. So the shop identified the problem, and I said, whoa, wait, time out. What's the year and mileage on your car? Because Hyundai has a 10-year, 100,000 mile powertrain warranty. Oh, the car only has 70,000 miles on it. It's only 5 years old. Okay, this should be covered under the warranty with Hyundai. So they need to go back to the dealership and tell the dealership what happened, and this should be covered under the warranty. Well, the service manager at the dealership decided to be a douchebag that day and said, well, because we didn't do your service, obviously the last timing belt that had been put on by the independent shop you took it to, that technician screwed up, did it wrong, and therefore we're not going to honor your warranty. You're going to have to buy a whole new engine for $6,000. And that was really not cool. It's impossible most cases to prove that another technician did something wrong, especially changing a timing belt. So this guy was just basically being a dick, and I called him on it and called the general manager and informed him that I was going to call Hyundai, and I would be happy to make a stink with all my contacts in the local media if they didn't do the right thing and honor these people's warranty. Now, you do, as a consumer and car owner, have to do certain things to meet the criteria for the warranty. You do have to stay on top of your service and do it by the schedule. But for them to claim that, oh, well, the timing belt was changed by a mechanic who didn't know what he was doing and he did it wrong and that's why it broke, without having really hard evidence that that was true, which they didn't, that was a very douchey thing to do. So if you do your service work at the dealership while the car is under factory warranty, it gives them no room to complain or to try and place blame elsewhere and deny you the warranty. But that shouldn't be your sole reason for doing service at the dealership. Another pros of going, to the dealership is, as I said before, the techs are usually trained, maybe even certified to work on your type of car. They're constantly getting the on-the-job training, getting all the updates, all the new makes and models. Every time there's a change, they get trained on it. So it's not a bad idea for at least the first year, especially if you have a new car that maybe has a new engine, or there was a significant redesign, and the independent shops may not be up to date on their education on that information from the manufacturer. So they've never seen one of these before, and okay, it's got some different stuff on it. You don't necessarily want them figuring out how to work on the latest and greatest model on your car. So that can be another good reason to go to the dealership. And as I said also, they can get the parts quicker. They keep parts in stock. You potentially have access to loaner vehicles. And many of these places have really good snacks. So they might have a popcorn machine. Some of the places have really, really good quality coffee machines and other really good snacks. Depends on the dealership. But I tell you, the Lexus store here in town has the best snacks, hands down. Although some independent shops do provide good snacks too. So, hey, that might be important to you if you've got to sit there for a couple hours working on your laptop and drinking some coffee. So it's what's important to you. But on the flip side, you're going to pay a higher rate, higher hourly rate for the dealership's labor. And sometimes, I hate to say this, but I have seen dealerships cut corners. So you take your car in for the 30,000 mile service and the 50,000 mile service. And there's a list of things in your owner's manual that should be done under that service. But a lot of the times, maybe it's changing the cabin air filter. And they look at your cabin air filter like, the cabin air filter is not actually dirty. We don't need to change this, but we're going to charge them for it anyway, because it's in the service and you're paying for that 30,000 mile service. So sometimes I have seen mechanics at dealerships cut those corners. It saves the dealership money, but you still think it's been done. Really what they should do is say, hey, you know what? We checked your cabin air filter and it was still perfectly clean. We don't actually need to change it, so we're not going to charge you for that. Does not usually happen that way at a dealership. An independent shop, because they don't necessarily have the set list of what your car needs at 30,000 miles. They're just going to do what they actually find that it needs. You could get a little more personalized service and not pay for things that you don't need. But one of the challenges at a dealership is it's really hard to get your car work done by the exact same technician every single time, because they do have a little more of I'm not even going to call it a team environment, because that implies that everybody works together happily and, chummy and pats each other on the back. That doesn't happen. Dealership environment is very cutthroat, and a lot of technicians stab each other in the back there, which is one of the reasons that mechanics I know left dealerships. It doesn't happen everywhere. But for you as a consumer, I personally like to have an individual relationship with the person who is touching my beloved car. Granted, I tend to love my car a little more than the average person. I love my Maggie before her. I love my Penelope. So I'm very picky about who touches my car. So I want to have just one mechanic who works on my car. And sometimes that's possible and sometimes it's not. Back when I did have Penelope, who was a Porsche, I had developed a great relationship with the service director there. We're still friends to this day, 20 odd years later. And there was a particular mechanic there that I really liked, because he went above and beyond for me one day. I had picked up my car after they did some work, and the mechanic personally called me later that day and he said, "Oh my God, I am so sorry. There was something I was supposed to check before I gave you your car back, and I forgot to check it, and I don't remember if I did it. So tell me where your car is, and I will drive up to wherever you are and check it, and then just call you and let you know, and then go back. So you don't have to bring your car back to the dealership." And okay, granted, I had a Porsche, so I kind of expect a higher level of customer service from a Porsche dealer than I would, say a Chevy dealer. But that was really, I was like, wow, okay, that exceeded my expectations. And from then on, I'm like, nobody but Neil touches my car. So it really broke my heart when Neil left and went to a different dealership, and I had to find somebody else at the dealership to touch my car. So at an independent shop, you may be able to have the ability to request a mechanic. Hey, I only want Pete working on my car. And you can make that appointment with that specific technician. Some shops are better about doing that and scheduling it and making sure that that appointment with that mechanic actually happens, and some are not. So if it is important for you to have one person be the one person that you trust to touch your car, make sure that shop or dealership has the processes set up to make sure that happens, because it's really difficult for you to potentially verify that that was a person who touched your car. Another thing to think of is, what type of work does your car need? If you just need some real basic oil or fluid changes, you don't necessarily need a master certified technician to do that. But if you have larger repairs that require a more experienced technician, or technician that has some of the more advanced ASE certifications, make sure that the person who is doing that work is certified and experienced to do that type of work. If you have really big work, like you need your engine swapped out, you need a new transmission, not every shop has the facilities to do that, because you have to have engine hoists and transmission jacks and some bigger equipment to get those giant parts out of the car. And because they take a longer period of time, you have to tie up a bay for sometimes days to do those big jobs. And that impacts the shop's ability and the mechanic's ability to keep working. And sometimes they just flat out don't have this, like literally the elbow room, the space to do it, because it's a smaller, tighter shop. So if you need bigger work, if you need a new engine, if you need a new transmission, make sure that shop has the training, the equipment, and the space to actually get that done. And then if you need diagnostics, you don't know what's wrong with your car, you need someone who is a true diagnostics expert that can go through that process and not just swap parts and hope for the best. If your car's having electrical issues, that's the worst thing. And very few mechanics are trained on electrical issues and really understand circuits and volts and all that stuff and have the training to do that. It also takes a lot more time to diagnose electrical issues, and it's very often not worth it to the shop to take that time to do it, or to you to pay for all the hours that it takes to do that. But if you do have an electrical problem that you need and want and are willing to pay to have traced, make sure a technician who actually knows electrical stuff to do that. It's a very, very specific skill set, and 90% of the mechanics out there do not have it. So make sure the right technician is working on your car for the type of work that your car needs. Really, you could think about finding a mechanic a lot like finding a doctor. So the mechanic is like the doctor, and the shop is like the hospital. So doctors have different specialties, right? You've got your general family practitioners, internal medicine, but then you have your cardiologists, your OBGYNs, your pediatricians, your oncologists. So you're not gonna go to a pediatrician if you have lung cancer. You need to go to the right doctor. Same thing with your car. If your car is having an electrical problem, you're not going to take it to, Joe Oil Change Boy who doesn't have any training to try and solve that problem. And the shop is like the hospital. Some hospitals are better than others. They train their people better. They have better processes. They have better customer service. That's what the shop is like. How do they take care of their people? How do they ensure that they've got the training? So it's a combination of finding the right technician and then finding the right shop to give you the overall best possible experience. And they need to be able to communicate well with you. So the type of things that you need to ask are, how many of your technicians are ASE certified? How many are master certified? Do you have ongoing training? Do you pay for your technicians to get ongoing training? These are some of the questions that you shouldn't hesitate to grill the manager of that shop on, because they're very, very important if you want to find a good shop. So in looking in general for shops, obviously ask friends, family, coworkers who have a similar vehicle as you for a referral. Do they have a shop they trust? Do they have a shop that they like? So if you have a German car and your coworker has a Kia, you might not necessarily ask them for a recommendation, because it's a lot easier to work on a Kia than it is to work on a German car. They may not be able to recommend the right type of mechanic to you. But look for what's called an ASE Blue Seal shop. I said ASE certifies the technicians, not the shops, but they still have this blue seal that they can give to shops that meet certain requirements. They have to have a certain number of technicians that are ASE certified with a certain number of certifications and a certain number of master certified technicians. They have requirements for the continuing education that the shops provide for their technicians and other employees. And those Blue Seal shops will display a seal or banner on their windows, in the shop, and on their website. So look for an ASE Blue Seal shop if you're looking for an independent shop. Similarly, AAA also approves shops. They have their own shops that are AAA shops. Those are shops that are franchised under the AAA brand, but other independent shops with their own brands can get AAA approved, but they have to meet some very strict standards. And that's not just in their technicians and the work that they do, but it even includes the look and feel and cleanliness of the shop. Because let's face it, for some of us, that's really important. They also have to have a number of ASE certified and master techs employed. And ASE has a group of auditors that go around and regularly inspect these shops to ensure that they are continuing to meet these standards and that they're not slacking off and the bathroom is still clean. So you can go to AAA.com to find an AAA approved shop in your area. And finally, there is the Ask Patty Certified Female Friendly program, where shops have to go through very detailed training programs on how to effectively market and sell to women. So the mechanics themselves don't typically go through the training. It's more of the customer-facing people, but the managers and your service technicians, anyone that's going to be customer-facing has to go through this training and meet certain standards for what is considered certified female friendly. And believe me, there's a whole section on bathrooms with this, but it's a great way for women to find a shop that they may feel more comfortable with. And we have found that shops that go through this training, it means it's a better shop for everyone, not just for women. And it even typically raises the level of quality of the shop for its own employees. So you can go to askpatty, PATTY.com, to look for a certified female friendly shop in your area. If you can find one that's approved by all three, you've probably found a good place to get your car worked on. So the bottom line is there are good mechanics and good shops out there, and you can find them. You don't have to do what I did and find one and marry him so he doesn't get away from you. But it is about building a relationship so that not only do they do a good job on your car, but they treat you and your car as more than just a transaction. They're looking at a long-term relationship. But you have to do your part as well and make car care a priority in your life and in your budget. Because a lot of the shops, their biggest complaint is customers don't want to pay to do the work that their car really and truly needs to be safe on the road. So as car owners, don't be a cheapskate. That car, you're putting your life in that car every day you drive. And if it is not well taken care of, you could get hurt. You could get killed. You could hurt someone else. So be a good owner on your end and do your part and do the service and find a shop that's going to develop a good relationship with you. All right, folks, happy holidays. We have one more episode for this year, and then we'll be finally into 2021. So happy holidays, no matter which of the December holidays you celebrate. Happy Hanukkah, Blessed Yule, Merry Christmas, Joyous Kwanzaa, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. We're out of here.
The Straight Shift Podcast is copyright LeeAnn Shattuck, The Car Chick, 2017. All views expressed by guest and or co-hosts are those of the guest and or co-hosts, and not necessarily those of LeeAnn Shattuck or The Car Chick.